The iron gates of the Morgan estate opened with a slow, deliberate creak, like they were announcing the arrival of someone significant. Beyond the gates stretched a driveway, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and towering oak trees that cast long shadows in the late afternoon sun. At the end stood the Morgan mansion, an architectural masterpiece with gleaming marble steps, tall glass windows, and a fountain so elaborate it could have belonged to a European palace. Inside, billionaire Richard Morgan paced his private study. The man had the presence of someone used to commanding boardrooms and closing billion-dollar deals, but today, his usually unshakable confidence carried a thread of worry. His twin daughters, Lily and Grace, both just 9 years old, were the only part of his life he truly considered priceless. Since his wife's sudden passing 2 years ago, their world had been fragile. He had hired nannies, private tutors, and housekeepers in hopes of bringing stability, but none of them lasted. The girls either didn't connect with them, or the help simply couldn't handle the emotional demands of the household. When the butler announced the arrival of the new housekeeper, Richard didn't expect much. But when the door opened, Maria stepped in, and immediately, something felt different. She wasn't wearing the crisp uniform or polished shoes of the professional domestic staff he usually employed. Instead, she had on a simple, clean blouse, a long skirt, and sturdy shoes that spoke of practicality rather than style. Her hair was tied back loosely, and her hands, though clean, bore the faint marks of someone accustomed to hard work. What struck Richard most wasn't her appearance, but her eyes. They were calm yet piercing, as though she saw far, far what was in front of her. She didn't glance around the opulent room in awe like others had. Instead, her gaze shifted immediately to the photographs on the mantel pictures of Lily and Grace. The girls appeared in the doorway. A moment later, whispering to each other, Lily, the more reserved of the two, stood half hidden behind her sister, while Grace, bold and curious, took a few steps forward. Maria crouched slightly to meet their height. "Hello," she said warmly, her voice carrying a tone that felt familiar. The girls exchanged a look, as though silently agreeing she wasn't like the others. Richard cleared his throat, stepping into the moment. "Maria, this is Lily and Grace. They've been through a lot." His voice softened as he said it, his gaze shifting briefly toward the floor. "Your primary job is to take care of them, keep them safe, and most importantly, earn their trust. That won't be easy." Maria didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "I understand, Mr. Morgan." Still skeptical, Richard decided to test her. "We've had incidents before. I don't tolerate carelessness around my daughters." His tone carried a quiet warning. Maria's response was steady. "You won't have to tolerate carelessness from me." There was no defensiveness in her voice, only certainty. It was as though she already understood the weight of the responsibility and accepted it without hesitation. The girls, curious now, began peppering her with small questions. Where she was from, whether she liked chocolate cake, if she could play board games. Maria answered each with patience and a gentle humor that made the children smile. Still, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't here simply because she needed a job. There was something in the way she looked at the girls, a depth in her expression that didn't match the detached professionalism of most employees. What Richard didn't know was that Maria's past carried shadows of its own. She had once stood in a place not so different from Lily and Grace, young, vulnerable, and in need of someone to protect her. And though she didn't say it aloud, she had sworn years ago that if she ever had the chance to shield another child from harm, she would do it without hesitation. For now, she kept that to herself. The Morgan mansion was her new post, but in her heart, she knew this was more than a job. Something had drawn her here, and soon, that reason would become clear. The first week passed quietly. Almost too quietly. Maria settled into the rhythm of the mansion. With surprising ease, she learned the routines, what time the girls had breakfast, when their tutors arrived, how they liked their tea. Lily began to emerge from her shell, sitting beside Maria in the afternoons as they read storybooks together. Grace, still energetic and bold, often tugged Maria into the garden for impromptu treasure hunts or games of tag. Richard observed all of this from a distance. He was a man accustomed to reading people quickly. Years of negotiating deals had made him an expert at spotting deception. But Maria, she puzzled him. She was polite, efficient, and kind. Yet she had an air of mystery that didn't quite fit the role of a humble housekeeper. It was on a Thursday evening, just after dinner, when the calm began to crack. Richard had called Maria into his study. The fire was burning low, casting a warm glow over the shelves of leather-bound books. He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing. "I want to be perfectly clear," Richard began, his tone deliberate. "You're doing well with the girls. Better than most." He paused, leaning back in his chair. "But this house, my family, they're not without enemies." Maria's gaze didn't waver. "I understand." Richard's eyes narrowed, slightly. "No, I don't think you do. You see, when you have money, influence," and he hesitated for a moment, "secrets, people try to use any weakness they can find. My daughters are that weakness." For the first time, a flicker of something, maybe anger, maybe resolve, passed over Maria's face. "Then it's my job to make sure no one gets close enough to use them." "That's not just your job," Richard replied sharply. "It's your responsibility. And if you ever put them in danger, even by accident." He let the sentence hang in the air, unfinished, but the meaning was clear. Maria didn't flinch. "I would never harm them, Mr. Morgan." Her voice carried a weight that suggested this was more than a promise. It was a vow. Before Richard could respond, the study door burst open, and Grace appeared, her eyes wide with excitement. "Maria, you have to see this. Come quick." Maria gave Richard a small nod and followed Grace down the long hallway. They ended up in the East Wing, where Lily was standing by the grand piano. On the piano's polished surface lay a small, intricately folded paper crane.
"Where did this come from?" Maria asked,
Picking it up gently. Lily shrugged. "It was just here. We were in the garden all afternoon, and when we came back, it was sitting on the piano." Maria turned the crane over in her hand. It was perfect, too perfect to be the work of a child. She noticed something else. The tiniest set of numbers written inside one folded wing. It was so faint, she almost missed it. "Does anyone else come into this room?" Maria asked. The girls shook their heads. "Only the cleaning lady, but she hasn't been here today," Lily said softly. Maria slipped the crane into her pocket. She didn't want to alarm the children, but something about it didn't sit right. She had seen marks like this before, codes hidden in plain sight. That night, as she lay in the modest guest room the Morgans had assigned her, Maria unfolded the crane under the dim glow of her bedside lamp. The numbers formed a date, just 3 days away. She stared at it, her mind racing.
Was it a coincidence, a prank, or was it a warning?
Down the hall, she could hear the soft breathing of the girls. As they slept, Maria's hand instinctively tightened around the paper crane. Whatever was coming, she would be ready. The morning after, Maria discovered the paper crane. The mansion seemed unusually still. Even the usual chatter of the staff in the kitchen was muted, as if everyone sensed something in the air. Maria went about her duties as if nothing was amiss. But inside, her thoughts circled around those tiny numbers, written inside the crane. 3 days. She decided not to tell Richard. Not yet. She needed to be sure before alarming him. Instead, she kept a closer eye on the girls, never letting them out of her sight. Every sound, every shadow, every unfamiliar face that passed near the property drew her attention. By late afternoon, the girls had convinced her to join them in the garden for a tea party. Grace had set out mismatched porcelain cups, and Lily had brought her favorite storybook. The scene was almost too perfect. Sunlight filtering through the leaves, the scent of roses drifting on the breeze. But Maria's instincts refused to rest. As Grace poured tea into Maria's cup, Maria's gaze flicked to the tall iron fence at the edge of the property. A figure stood just beyond it, motionless, watching. Her heart clenched. She rose slowly, careful not to alarm the girls. "Stay here," she said with forced cheer. "I just need to check something." She crossed the garden, her steps light but purposeful. When she reached the fence, The figure was gone. Only the faint rustle of leaves marked their departure. Maria scanned the street beyond the fence, but saw nothing. Still, she knew what she had seen. A man, tall, wearing a dark coat, despite the warm day. She returned to the garden, masking her unease with a smile. False alarm, she told the girls, though her mind was anything but calm. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Maria did something she hadn't done in years. She stayed awake, keeping watch. The mansion was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old wooden beams. Hours passed, the moon casting pale light across the halls. It was just after midnight when she heard it. A soft click, the sound of a lock being tested. Maria's entire body went still. She slipped silently into the corridor, her bare feet making no sound against the carpet. The noise came again, this time from the direction of the side entrance. She reached the door in seconds. The handle was turning slowly, deliberately. Maria's hand went to the small folding knife she kept hidden in her apron pocket. She waited, breath shallow. Then, the movement stopped. A faint whisper, too muffled to catch, drifted through the door. Footsteps retreated into the darkness. Maria opened the door just enough to glance outside. The moonlight revealed a shape moving toward the tree line at the edge of the property. She couldn't make out a face, but she saw something glint in their hand before they vanished into the shadows. Closing the door, she turned the lock firmly and checked it twice. Whoever they were, they had been bold enough to test the house while everyone slept. This was no coincidence. The paper crane, the figure at the fence, the attempted entry, it was all connected. But why? And why now? She headed toward the stairs to check on the girls. On the way, she passed Richard's study. The door was ajar, though she was certain he had closed it earlier. A faint draft slipped through, carrying with it the scent of old paper and something metallic. Stepping inside, she froze. One of Richard's desk drawers was open, its contents disturbed. A single sheet of paper lay in the center of the desk, out of place. Maria picked it up. It was blank, at least at first glance. She tilted it toward the lamp, and faint marks began to appear, written in some kind of invisible ink. Her pulse quickened. She knew these marks. They weren't random. They were instructions, and the final line was a chilling directive. Take the girls. Maria's grip tightened around the paper. She didn't know who had written it, or how it had been left here, but she knew one thing: time was running out. Maria didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every creak of the mansion's old walls felt like a warning. She kept the note with the chilling words, "Take the girls," hidden in her pocket, unwilling to let it out of her sight. At dawn, she made her decision. She would keep the girls in her sight all day. No exceptions. She even brought their breakfast to the playroom, pretending it was a special treat, though in truth she simply didn't trust the house anymore. Richard was due back from a business trip that evening. Maria considered calling him, but she feared the danger might escalate if the person watching them knew they were aware. Instead, she kept her eyes and ears open, waiting for the intruder to make their next move. By mid-afternoon, an uneasy quiet settled over the mansion. Even the birds outside seemed to have gone silent. Maria was sitting with Grace and Lily in the living room, helping them with a puzzle, when she heard it, a faint metallic ping from somewhere upstairs. Her stomach dropped. That sound hadn't come from the girls' toys. Maria rose slowly. "Stay here and keep working on the puzzle, darlings. I'll be right back." She forced a smile she didn't feel. She crept up the staircase, her hand gripping the small folding knife in her apron pocket. The sound came again, this time from the far end of the corridor, near Richard's private study. As she approached, she saw it. The side window at the end of the hallway was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze, and then she heard footsteps. Before she could react, a shadow emerged from the study. It was the same man she'd glimpsed by the fence. Tall, wearing that same dark coat. His face was partially obscured by a scarf, but his eyes were sharp and unflinching. In one hand he carried a small black case. "You shouldn't be here," Maria said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "I'm only here for what I came for," the man replied coldly. Step aside, and no one gets hurt. Maria didn't move. You'll have to go through me. The man narrowed his eyes. The girls aren't yours to protect. They're exactly mine to protect, she said, taking a step forward. He hesitated, clearly not expecting defiance. That moment was all Maria needed. She lunged, slamming the door to the study shut and locking it behind her. Then she ran for the stairs. The man's shout echoed down the corridor as he gave chase. Maria's only thought was to get to the girls. She reached the living room just as he appeared at the top of the stairs. "Girls! Behind me!" she barked. Grace and Lily scrambled behind her, clutching at her skirt. The man slowed, realizing she was cornered, but still unwilling to back down. "Move," he ordered. Maria shook her head. "Leave. Now, or I promise you, you won't leave at all." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then from outside, the sharp sound of tires screeching against the driveway shattered the standoff. Richard burst through the front door, 2 security men on his heels. The intruder bolted toward the back entrance, but the guards were faster. They tackled him to the ground, the black case skidding across the polished floor. Richard rushed to the girls, pulling them into his arms. "Are you hurt? Did he—" "We're fine," Maria interrupted, her voice calm but firm. He didn't get to them. The guards dragged the man away, and Richard opened the case. Inside was a stack of documents, legal papers, photographs and old letters. Richard's face went pale. This is my late wife's handwriting," he whispered. "These are custody papers. Someone was trying to claim the girls illegally." Maria's mind flashed back to the paper crane, the open window, the whispered voices. This had been planned for weeks, maybe longer. Richard turned to her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Maria, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my daughters." She smiled faintly, though inside she was still shaking. "You don't need to thank me. I promised I'd protect them, and I meant it." That night, the mansion was secure again, every lock checked, and every window sealed. But Maria knew the danger hadn't vanished completely. People like that intruder didn't give up easily. Still, as she tucked Grace and Lily into bed, she felt a fierce, unshakable resolve. Whoever tried to take them again would have to go through her, and she was ready.